Hi there and welcome back to CSEC English B Paper 2 Solutions with Miss Athalie. Today we are continuing with Breath, Eyes, Memory, Section C, Prose Fiction, and we're looking at this question here. Now remember, for this paper you have 4 choices and you only have to choose one. You only do one essay from this section. So if you've been here a while, we've gone through this before, so I won't spend a lot of time here. So this is our question. If you would like, you can pause the video to read it carefully. I've highlighted the 3 different parts of the question, the most important parts that you need to answer. But we're going to break it down some more in the next slide. Remember that the questions are always going to give you a statement at the beginning to consider, and then you will have to elaborate on that a little more in your essay. So let's break it down, because if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to understand what we have to do. So first, our statement. Breath, eyes, memory focuses on longings or desires that are never met. So when we read this on our exam, we need to sit and think about it for a little while. Do we understand what that means? Do we have any clue what's going on? If not, go to a different question. But if you understand, continue reading. Write an essay in which you describe one example in which Sophie's longings or desires are not met, and one example in which another character's longings or desires are not met. So we have to consider 2 characters in this one, but they told us one of the characters we have to focus on, and that's Sophie. Now, if you decide you're going to write about Attie and Martine, you're going to lose a lot of marks. Discuss the impact of unmet longing or desire on one character. And the technique. Examine the writer's use of one technique to present longings and desires in the novel. And remember, this last section is always going to ask you about a technique, so make sure you know them. If you like, you can study techniques which are specific to breath, eyes, memory. So when you are doing practice questions or when you're just studying, you can go online, you can simply type breath, eyes, memory techniques, and you should be able to find a few. There's also a textbook which includes that information as well, because I know that sometimes it's difficult to figure it all out on your own. Right, so we move on to the next step, which is brainstorming. And I added this slide here because you are given a page like this on your CXC answers script. And it is just for writing notes. As it says on the top, you may make notes here. This will not be marked. They didn't just put that there to waste paper. It is for you to write a plan, to make notes, to scribble, to doodle. Well, I would not recommend drawing because you do not have time for that. It is for your planning. So it's important. If planning was not important, they would not have added that page. So in the next slide, I show you how I use this page, right? I start by drawing a cloud in the middle. And this is just my preferred technique. Your teacher may have taught you a different one, and you're free to use that. Whatever works best for you. In the middle of the cloud, I put the theme that I have to consider, which is unmet longings and desires. And then around that cloud, I am going to write the things that I have to consider. What do I have to write about? And this is going to help me. It's going to guide me in my brainstorming process. So first part, describe how Sophie's longings and desires are not met. And I have to do the same for another character. So I chose Sophie desires a perfect mother-daughter relationship. And then I chose Tante Attie. She longs to be loved. I'll keep writing about Tante Attie. I guess she's one of my favorite characters. Then we want to look at the impact of unmet longing or desire on one character. So I'm going to look at Tante Attie. She feels tremendous pain and eventually turns to alcoholism. And then finally, the technique. We can see that the author has used contrasting characters that are very different. So you have Louise and Tante Attie, Sophie and Martine. Some achieve their desires, some don't. So after we've filled up this page that is just for us to write notes, we can begin writing because we have an idea of how our essay is going to look. So just before we begin, you know that you should have at least 5 paragraphs in your essay. You need to have an introduction. Then my first part should be about Sophie and Tante Attie. You may divide this into 2 paragraphs, or you may just have 1 paragraph. Then part 2, the impact on Tante Attie. Part 3, the technique, and then we have the conclusion. All right? So you notice how we spend a significant amount of time on planning, and then we move on to writing. Well, actually, it is recommended that you spend at least 10 minutes on the plan, no more than 10, or you'll not have enough time to write. But please don't just begin writing, or you're going to end up with a disastrous essay that nobody wants to read. Right, next step, write. Write for 35 minutes. Because your suggested time is 45 minutes. If you plan for 10, you have 35 minutes to write. Next step, we don't just close that booklet and say, hey, I'm done with this exam. We have to proofread. Even this dog is doing it, so you can do it too. It is very important because sometimes we may catch little mistakes that can be fixed easily. So always make sure that when you put that last full stop, you go back to the beginning of the essay and you read through it. So, this is what our essay looks like, and we're going to take it apart bit by bit. So, in our introduction, we must mention every part of the question. I highlighted it just like I did in the beginning. Now, this is a rather short introduction. It's just for the sake of explanation to include the most important parts. You may add more information if you like, but you must have those yellow, pink, and blue points, which are the 3 main parts that you have to discuss in order. So it goes. The theme of unfulfilled longings and desires is present throughout Edwidge Danticat's Breath, Eyes, Memory. Both Sophie and Aunt Attie have desires which are never fulfilled. This unfulfillment has negative consequences for most characters, especially Attie. One technique used by Danticat to present this theme is the use of contrasting characters. Now, I just realized a small error here. It should be Tante Attie, not Aunt. If I use Aunt, the A should be, it should not be capitalized, okay? So part 1. Sophie has numerous unmet longings and desires. One such desire is for a perfect relationship with her mother. However, as the novel progresses, it becomes clear that this is unattainable. The relationship between Sophie and Martin begins when Martin is sexually assaulted at the age of 16. Sophie is the result of this rape and serves as a constant reminder of the traumatic experience. Her Aunt Attie cares for her until the age of 12, and up to this point, she has no recollection of her mother. She is not enthusiastic about having to leave Haiti to live with Martin, as she is practically a stranger. While daydreaming, she imagined that her mother was similar to Ursule, the voodoo goddess with perfect feminine qualities. However, after meeting her, she realizes that this is far from the truth. Martine is a scrawny lady who is tormented by constant nightmares and reminders of the rape. Sophie tries her best to serve as a source of comfort. When Sophie is 18, the already fragile mother-daughter relationship is further harmed when Martine decides to test her constantly to see if her hymen is intact. This eventually leads Sophie to harm herself and causes the near complete destruction of the relationship. While the two make amends eventually, the mother-daughter relationship never reaches a state of perfection. So here we see how Sophie's longings, desires for a relationship are not met. Now we can move on to Attie. Tante Attie also has several unmet desires. One of them is the desire for love. Her romantic interest in Monsieur Augustin is made clear in the first part of the novel. He walks her home after the potluck, but instead of going inside, she observes his nightly routine with his wife and sheds a tear. Later, a love note signed by Monsieur Augustin is found stuck to the bottom, a hiding spot which Atty had apparently forgotten about. Her own thoughts about love demonstrate that she believes she is unlucky. She said the lottery was like love. Providence was not with her, but she was patient. It is only when Sophie is reunited with her mother that we are made aware that Monsieur Augustin was initially supposed to marry Atty, but the plans did not work out after he met Lotus. Apart from romantic love, Atty's desire for being loved by her best friend is also not fulfilled. It appears that Louise and Atty have a very close friendship. However, it is all called into question when Louise disappears without saying goodbye. So here we've tackled the first part. Next, we move on to the impact. Unmet longings and desires impact most characters negatively. Atty, in particular, is grief-stricken, and this is made evident as she watches the man she loves prepare for bed with his wife. This moment causes her so much pain that she cries. The departure of her dear friend also causes her considerable pain. The constant disappointments cause her to turn to alcoholism as a way to drown the pain. When Sophie returns to Haiti as an adult, she witnesses Atty's drunkenness, and it is clear that this has become a coping mechanism. Right. So, impact: Atty is an alcoholic. Part 3, technique. One technique used by Danticat to portray the theme of unmet longings and desires is the use of contrasting characters. For example, Louise and Atty are very different. Atty's desires are never met, and she appears to be a victim of her own circumstances. On the other hand, Louise takes her situation into her own hands and devises a plan to make her longings a reality. She is able to leave Haiti, while Atty remains there in despair. Two other contrasting characters are Sophie and Martine. Martine adheres to psychologically damaging cultural practices simply because the same was done to her. She does not know any differently and refuses to see that her actions are abusive. Sophie, on the other hand, will not put her own daughter through this harmful experience. Simple as that. Then we move to the conclusion. Here, we just recap our main points. Be careful not to include any new points or information. Do not tell me about Martine's boyfriend and what he liked to have for dinner. That is irrelevant to the argument. So just close this, recap your main points, alright? In the novel Breath, Eyes, Memory, many characters struggle with unmet longings and desires. The impact is mostly negative. Danticat creatively contrasts different characters to highlight the theme of unmet longings and desires. And just like that, we have finished our essay. But I want to stress that the planning process is very important when writing an English literature essay. So please do not skip that part. And then, the more you practice, the better you will get at it. And you will be able to do very well when you get your actual exam paper. So, easy, right? If not, keep at it. Practice makes perfect. I will see you next time. Perhaps we will move on to drama and we might look at Tija and his brothers. So please return and enjoy the rest of your day or night whenever you're watching this video. Goodbye.